Alright, so in this video we're going to address the weirdness of my newest purchase, a 1972 Citroën DS. So, the first weird thing we're going to point out immediately, which is the biggest, to me at least, is the drivetrain. So this drivetrain, let me go look at one of my normal cars. Okay, don't mind the fact that it doesn't have a battery or an ignition coil for the moment, because I'm using it to test another thing. But, so this is your normal drivetrain on a normal 50s car. So, you got your motor, right behind the motor, you got your transmission. That's not so on the DS. On the DS, you have your transmission, and then your motor, which I find to be absolutely astonishing. You see, Volkswagen did this back in the 30s, but that's because this is a rear-engined car. This car was designed in the 50s and came out in the 50s, and it used the same principle and design of the Volkswagen, except they mounted it in the front, so it'll be front-wheel drive. Another weird thing about that is this car had disc brakes from new, originally from 1955. And in 1955, not many cars had disc brakes. But if we look down at the wheels, we don't see any brakes at all. That's because the disc brakes, they're mounted back here, or under the hood, right off the transmission. Now this one's, it's missing the brake pad on this side and the little caliper, I guess, but it is on the transmission side, which I find really weird. They're also ceramic discs, which are really advanced. But just looking past that, the transmission's in the front, which means the crankshaft is going to be way in the back of the motor, which is a big problem, because how do you drive everything? How do you drive all your belts and everything? Well, they put a pulley on the camshaft, and that's what drives everything. Now, that's a big problem for me, because the engine in this car is currently locked up, and I can't access the crankshaft to turn it, so I gotta turn it by the camshaft, and I don't want to break the camshaft or the timing chain trying to get this motor unlocked, so I'm probably going to wind up pulling the motor out and rebuilding it. But, yeah, that's really weird. Now, kind of related to that, everything on this car, including not limited to the steering, brakes, and suspension, is driven by a belt. Mainly a belt going to a 2,500 PSI pump. And I have that pump in that trailer back there with a bunch of parts, but that pump drives everything. It drives your hydropneumatic suspension. You fill this reservoir, which is literally just a bucket, with LHM green mineral fluid on this car, and it drives everything. It drives your brakes, which, another thing, this car does not have a brake master cylinder. It has a little mushroom on the floor. We will get to that later. But it drives your brakes. It drives your suspension, because this doesn't have normal springs. What this has is the LHM fluid acts as a damper inside one of these accumulators. It acts as a damper, and it has pressurized nitrogen gas that acts as a spring. All very advanced stuff. Apparently the ride on these was so good that Rolls-Royce licensed them for their Silver Shadows, I think it was. And just a side tangent, look at that distributor cap. It looks like a spaceship. Another thing on this car is its fiberglass roof. It kind of lowered the center of gravity. I don't think it lowered it that much. But it looks cool and is very usable. You can actually change them in different colors if you wanted. You can have a black one, you can have a white one, and you can easily paint over it and bring it back, because I think it's the resin that paints it. And if we move inside the car, we can see the floor. It's kind of ruined. I mean, it looks really bad because it's made of foam. There is a 1.5-inch layer of foam on the floor of every DS from the factory. This one still has the foam, but unfortunately mice have eaten away at the middle part, which has led to a small hole going in the floor here. But that's really the only rust, except for in the back of this thing. If we move to the front, we see the iconic one-spoke steering wheel. The one-spoke steering wheel is very iconic on any Citroën, but this one is weird, because I don't know if it's the same on a 2CV or something, but the wheel and the column are one unit. As in, you cannot just unbolt the steering wheel and have that hang on your wall. The steering column is attached to the wheel, and you can't unbolt it. So the steering wheel basically is about 4.5 feet long. It's very weird. Now, don't know what happened there, but you notice there's a gear lever sticking out of the dashboard above and right in front of the speedometer, which is, it kind of defeats the purpose of the one-spoke steering wheel. But that is the gear shift lever for the Citroën hydraulic assisted manual transmission. This is a 4-speed manual, and what it is, it doesn't have a clutch pedal down there. As we can see, all there's a gas pedal back there, there's a brake, and you got your emergency brake. This model does not have a clutch pedal, because that, I don't know, it was weird. Citroën, they had this Citroën transmission, which I'm thinking works similarly to the Volkswagen Auto Stick type, where you kind of put on the brake and shift into gear, and the car will sort it out for itself. That's what I'm assuming this does. It's weird. It's a 4-speed, basically a normal manual transmission, but you don't have a clutch pedal. I find that pretty inconvenient, but I'm going to try to keep it as the car. Another thing. You see that right there? In the middle of the gauge cluster is your stopping distance-ometer, I'm going to call it. Because if you see in there, you can see numbers. And that rotates with the needle on the speedometer, and it will show you how many feet you need in order to stop the car on dry road. I think it's pretty neat. So from 110 miles an hour, you need 800 feet to stop this thing. Very cool. That's what I was I wasn't talking about that, but the motor is set back so far that you got this giant lump in the middle that actually takes up a bunch of legroom. But you got a flat floor, so that cancels itself out. It's actually a really, really nice car in here. I love this car. Yeah, I'll talk about that on the outside. Let's move to the back. So when we get the back of the DS, we can see that we have these teardrop turn signals that are mounted on the roof. While the brake light and reversing light, I'm assuming that is, are mounted down below, actually inside the bumper, that would be, because the bumper goes around. I find that absolutely incredible. I absolutely love the look of that thing. This car looks like a teardrop, and that just, it makes it look really good. But we notice here, okay, so you will not be able to change that wheel very easily because you have the fender blocking it. But if you notice, there's a single bolt that holds this fender on. You take that bolt out, you are able to slide the fender off 2 pegs. I'll actually show you. I was able to take the fender off. This is what it looks like with no fender on the back. It's held in with 2 pegs, and then the 1 bolt. Your fuel filler assembly is all part of the inner fender structure. You just got the flap on the fender. You got a hydropneumatic sphere down here that drives your suspension. We have no trunk floor, which is a big problem with this one, but shouldn't be that bad. Honestly, this car is really fun. This thing is going to be a fun project, even though I'm going to have to rebuild the motor. But yeah, this thing should be fun to drive around. And if I'm not able to rebuild this motor, I'm looking for suggestions on an engine swap for this thing. So if you have suggestions where I could swap an engine into this thing, please no LS stuff. I do not like LS V8s. But yeah, so those are the weird, interesting objects you will find on a Citroën DS.